Welcome everyone to the JB Media Digital Drop-In. I'm so glad to have everyone here today. As usual, just a couple housekeeping notes. Please feel free to drop any comments or thoughts into the chat. You can also put any of your questions into the Q&A. And we also have a live poll running as you all are joining us as we kick things off. But I'm so absolutely thrilled to have both of our speakers here today, Justin Belleme as well as Rand Fishkin. So I'm going to pass it off to Justin, but I will be here on the chat. If there's any technical issues, don't hesitate to let me know. And thanks again for joining us.
Thank you, Sarah. Thanks for hosting, tech supporting, and providing support for this. Rand, welcome. Thank you for being here.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, Justin.
Absolutely. So to give folks a quick rundown of how we're going to run this, I'm going to do a short presentation of about 10 minutes. I've been teaching on partnership marketing for about 7 years now. And many of you probably have already seen a presentation I've done in the past. This is a much shorter, much slimmed down presentation to leave plenty of time for a deep dive conversation with our guest. Sorry, my phone just blew up. With our guest, Rand, about his experience at his current company and his current and past experience with partnership marketing. So I will start that presentation now, and then we will switch into the more interactive portion in a little bit. So let's see here. All righty. So first of all, I don't know if you remember these interactions back in 2015, Rand, but we actually met in person at the Internet Summit, where you were a guest on our the previous iteration of this monthly training program that we do with Sarah there in the lobby. And then you were actually I was in attendance of your keynote lecture and near the front row. And then you actually sat in one of the sessions I was on with Carl Sakis and my friend Caitlin, and Caitlin put that panel together, and appreciate having you, in the audience for what we were talking about as well. So we go back a little bit, and I think we even ate the same ramen restaurant. It was like we were sitting across the restaurant, and there's Rand, his partner, and it was awesome. So for those of you who don't know, Rand is currently the co-founder and CEO of SparkToro, which we'll learn a lot more about in the second half, and was previously I think co-founder, is that right, for Moz? Were you the founder, or was that a co-founded operation?
Yeah, co-founded with my mom.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
Well, we probably won't get into too much detail about that business, but that's where I first learned about your work, being an SEO expert or educator and practitioner myself. We were all often following your thought leadership, using your tool, and sharing it with our students and clients throughout the last about 20 years I've been doing digital marketing. So it's a really awesome experience to have you on one of our live trainings today. Thank you.
Yeah, man, I'm thrilled to be here.
Awesome. So I want to give a real brief history of my partnership work to sort of set the stage for this. This is not inclusive or comprehensive, but my first client was Holistic Holiday, which is a wellness conference that my father co-founded in 2003. And their early years, their partnership strategy wasn't very effective. But in 2011, I convinced them to shift it into more of an influencer-driven strategy. And I led that effort. In the first year, we had one influencer. The next year, we had 3. And then within a couple of years, it became the #1 sales channel and allowed them to really kind of almost shut down and discontinue a lot of their more expensive paid media that they were doing, because it was driving so many sales for their conference. And actually the conference got to the point where it was selling out in about 6 weeks, mostly through partnerships. And when I started doing email list campaigns around partnership strategy in 2015, they had built over the previous 11 years, they had built a 12,000 person email list. And then over the following few years, including a big campaign we did last summer, they basically grew the list from 12,000 to almost 100,000 names. And that's why we can sell out their conference so quickly, because we have more than enough people on the list to fill all the available seats at the event. And in 2020, we did a virtual conference, which I'll talk about briefly in a minute, which had 30 active partners. We had 50 partners total, but some of them were pretty inactive, but 30 that were active. And then between 2015 and 2019, we led marketing for a San Francisco area-based conference in the social impact investing space. And as part of that project, I personally managed, and then with the help of a team member, managed up to 50 partnerships to promote that event. And each year we coordinated about 10 different campaigns, really the key messages around the calendar of promoting that conference. And then last 2 months ago in April, we actually designed and led our own conference in a similar sector to what SOCAP was in. We lost SOCAP as a client due to COVID, and I decided to do my own event with the collaboration of about 20 partners, and I'll talk about that. We sold 500 tickets to that conference, and we had actually almost 195 total partners involved. We'll talk briefly about that before we move on. So this proverb is overused, I think, but I do think in the context of this conversation today, it's a kind of a nice framing. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. Obviously, creating a good partnership strategy takes a lot more nuance than just following this simple recommendation. We'll get more into that in a little bit. So the case for partnerships, in my experience, partnerships can be an affordable approach. I think that's part of why people are drawn to partnerships, because they can be pretty much where you just share resources and share opportunities, and it can be fairly inexpensive. This is something I know. I saw a class that you taught, Rand, a few months ago, which is part of the impetus for me to reach out to you about this today. Where you were talking about how partnership marketing can help you divest from Google and Facebook and not rely so much on those things. So we'll get into that a little bit more later on, but I think that's important. And we've felt that way too. It often relies on either email or a website that gets good organic traffic to drive the activation in replacement of those other channels that are getting more expensive, more competitive, and more fraught on a variety of different levels. And they can become regenerative. I like the word regenerative. We're going to talk about another way of saying that later in this presentation, which is calling it a flywheel approach, which is something that Rand has written a lot about. And I'll let him explain what he means by that, and I'll chime in with some of my experience with that as well. But what I mean by that is that if you build a partnership program, especially for an annual event or an annual campaign, over time, as the partners grow, the effectiveness of the campaign can grow, and you can selectively add more people. And the more awareness you get for that event or campaign, the more high-profile partners you might want to join. And over time, it can just become bigger and bigger without necessarily adding costs or creating more complexity. So I will note that my experience with partnerships, because of where I sit between doing a lot of event marketing and doing a lot of campaign marketing, a lot of my partnership activations that I have experience with are around campaigns and events. So my experience has been around virtual events and education, like this, for example, this series we're doing right now. We've done a whole lot with travel and tourism, with contests and giveaways. We just finished a series of 6 giveaways that were collaborative and partner driven for one of our brands, one of our sister brands recently. Conferences and in-person events, like what talking about my father's event. And then collaboratively creating guides, ebooks, resources where multiple organizations come together, contribute content, and then share and promoting it. And I know that Rand has been involved in a number of campaigns of that nature. You can talk more about that in a little bit. So 2 case studies, and then we'll jump into the conversation with Rand. The first I just mentioned earlier was the virtual conference we did for my father's business. My father has actually sold the business, but for his business partner. After 16 or 17 years of promoting an in-person event that had grown from 400 to 2,000 people that took place on a cruise ship, it sailed just before COVID. Came back in, COVID was hitting the US, and they had to cancel for 2021, and they might even have to cancel for 2022 because of the nature of the event. So last summer, as our first big attempt at virtual convenience, we produced a virtual event called Holistic Holiday at Home. And in every way possible, we tried to make it like a at-home version of the vegan cruise. We had dinner parties, we had a talent show, we had 45 hours of live education, and we had 53 speakers and over 50 partners. And the result was 56,000 registrations to the free component of the event, and then 1,500 upgrades to the paid, over $200,000 in ticket sales, over 45,000 new email addresses acquired, 15 to 20 new partners added, which we can work with in the future, and almost doubling our email list for whenever they get back to doing in-person events. But we've also used that list to promote other affiliate virtual events and made, I think, close to $50,000 in affiliate revenue this year. We've done our own follow-up workshops, which have generated up to $30,000 in sales for a one-day event. And that's continued to keep the business afloat while they wait till they can do their main product again, which is an in-person conference. And then back in April, we produced, I executive produced with the support of these 20 organizations in this cloud of logos on the left, a conference with about 40 sessions. It had a 3 or 4 series free sessions leading up, which got 2,500 registrations. We converted 500 of them to the paid event, which basically broke even, but we now own that list. We now have improved our collaboration. We had 103 speakers. We really set out to make it a very diversity and inclusive event. We had almost 50% non-white speakers, and we're really happy with the quality of content. We now have a great content library, which we can leverage in a variety of ways to bundle and promote collaboratively to build our list further until we do the event again sometime in 2022, likely with a larger audience and better, return on investment. But the return on collaboration, return on list growth was great, despite the fact that it was basically break even. But we were already getting work from it. We're getting new collaborations happening every week as a result of it. So it was worthwhile, even though it basically broke even for us. So now I'm going to drop my screen share and ask our first question of you, Rand. So Rand, you've been at this for a while now between your businesses, and I'm sure you had work going on before you started Moz as well. So
not really.
that was your
I
first...
mean, I dropped out of college to start Moz, so not a lot of work.
Okay. Well, and when did you start Moz again? Can you remind us?
2001.
Okay, so it's been 20 years since you started Moz.
Yeah. But I obviously left that business in 2018. Yeah.
Right. So, and now you have another business which is even more rooted in partnerships, which we can talk about in a little bit. But can you give us a little bit of your experience with partnerships? Surely you've seen a lot of successful and unsuccessful partnerships throughout your career. Can you share some examples of how partnerships have helped you grow your companies or specific projects you've done throughout your 20-year career?
Sure. Yeah. Plenty of them. I mean, one of the early partnerships that Moz did that turned into a very successful sort of series of things was we partnered with a consulting agency, Distilled, which I think was acquired by Brain Labs a couple of years ago. But I'd become friends with the founders of Distilled, Will Critchlow and Duncan Morris, out in London, and so we started doing events together. They were writing for the Moz blog. Their consultants were contributing sort of content on a regular basis, I think almost every week or so. We were essentially, helping to promote their consulting work and featuring them and a number of other consulting folks. But Moz had divested itself of its consulting business in 2008, something like that, and essentially handed over our consulting business to Distilled, our existing clients. We said, hey, these folks will serve you well. You should go work with them. And that included some lucrative, some good deals for them. The exciting part was, over the next, I think the partnership was probably a decade long, maybe even more than that, but essentially meant that we were building up this conference and event series together. That became MozCon, which of course, got, well, pre-COVID, 1,600 folks every year in Seattle to this giant marketing event, probably, it was $1.5 to $2 million in revenue. Very, very big, high profile event in the marketing world, especially the search marketing world. And then Distilled was also building their conference series, which was more global and in lots of other cities, smaller events, usually 200 to 300 attendees in places like San Diego and New York and New Orleans. They did one every year in London. So those, that sort of event series worked very well for both of us. And, this was it was a really good partnership because Distilled was essentially showing, here's how Moz's software, is being used by us to help our consulting businesses. And Moz was at the same time sort of showing, hey, here's this consultancy that's doing this amazing work. Here's how they're doing it. Here's what their, sort of experts on their team are saying. And that promotion never felt too salesy, right? It was just, hey, we like your stuff. Well, we like your stuff too. Well, maybe let's do something together. And in fact, I've done this hundreds of times. So another really good example that probably some of the folks in the audience are familiar with, if you've heard of this phenomenon of zero-click searches in Google, which is something I've been talking about the last few years. In fact, it's one of the reasons that I am a little nervous about building up strength exclusively in sort of the Google marketing space and SEO, SEM. So Google over the last really 8-10 years has been increasing the percentage of searches that end without a click, right? So Justin, you go to Google and you say, oh yeah, I'm looking for, gosh, I need to respackle a wall. How do I do that? And you search for it and Google sort of extracts the answer that you need, whatever content you need, places it on the front page, and then you don't need to click through to any of the results. So nobody gets any benefit from searches except Google themselves. It's pretty sweet deal, right? You're a monopoly. No one's realistically going to stop you from crawling their website. Technically, every time Google visits your website, you're paying, a little bit to have them crawl you. So you're paying the cost of them scraping your content and republishing it for free without copyright or trademark infringement. Oh man, that's a sweet monopoly business to be in. Not an awesome deal for content creators. So I partnered with this company called JumpShot, and now I've partnered with another company called SimilarWeb. They collect data at scale from hundreds of millions of devices around the world who've opted into these panels, and they sort of share all the URLs that they visit. And then JumpShot and SimilarWeb aggregate that data and turn it into interesting insights. And one of the things I really wanted to know is, what's the percent of searches that end without a click? Because I thought this was a big thing. Turns out it was huge. What was that? 4 years ago, it was 3 years ago, it was 50%. Last year, it was 65%. So it's growing very, very rapidly still. And when I published this data, not only did it help get a lot of people in the marketing world aware of JumpShot's data. This is tragically, they were shut down by their parent company, but got a ton of people aware of them, brought a lot of people to their website, brought them a lot of customers, and also got SparkToro a lot of attention and awareness. I gave a number of keynotes on this topic. The research ended up being cited by Congress, by Congressman David Cicciolini when he was grilling Sundar Pichai, Google CEO, about the antitrust case, and being used by a number of other antitrust investigators here in the US and in Europe. So, fascinating stuff, right? Like really, really works well. And a totally different kind of partnership. You have interesting data. I have a platform and an idea for it. Let's collaborate together. I'll promote your stuff. By sharing your data, right, I earn a lot of traffic and visits and awareness. And of course, it sort of serves SparkToro, because SparkToro is trying to help people broaden their marketing horizons outside of just Google and Facebook.
Thanks, Rand. You've shared a couple of examples with your event series, and then this more recent big data research thought leadership. Can you share some examples maybe would relate to smaller businesses around similar concepts, education, thought leadership, collaborative content? Obviously, this right here is an example.
Justin, but I am the smallest business you can be. SparkToro is 2 people. That's right. So I'm not. When I reached out to JumpShot or SimilarWeb, for example, I didn't have a big, company that I was bringing to bear or millions of dollars. Right. I just said, hey, I have this interesting idea. Would you folks be up for it? We're a tiny little 2-person startup, and they went for it, right? So I think it is not about being big, and certainly SparkToro has done a ton of this. I just 2 tiny little businesses. So Alyssa Doucette, who's essentially, a coach for writers, publishers, authors, email newsletter folks, independent consultant, right? She's a one-woman business. Casey and I have our little two-person business. And she was like, hey, I'm really curious about how I could use SparkToro for this email newsletter thing. So we had a conversation, we chatted a little bit. I had met her once in Quebec City where she lives. She was actually friends with my wife. So we had a little chat and she's like, yeah, let's do a little webinar together. And we filmed a 45-minute, sort of walkthrough of SparkToro, like, hey, here's how you can do all these interesting and clever marketing things. And we had really great chemistry on the call, and it was very exciting, all the things we were discovering. So we published it, right? We turned it into like a demo that we now have on our website that we include in our onboarding. That is, we sent out an email newsletter about it. It was great, right? Nobody's paying anybody anything. There's no money exchange, but there's tons of value exchange, right? For Alyssa, like she's getting sort of, consulting-esque stuff and this access to SparkToro, and then having her business promoted to sort of all of our audience, right? Which is our email newsletter goes out to maybe about 30,000 folks. And so, great. And then for us, like we're getting this great content, tiny little businesses working together, finding interesting ways to partner. What I love about this is you don't have to pay any money to do this. You can create value by having clever, thoughtful conversations, content creation, ideation. With Alyssa and me, it was just a call, right? And it just turned out to be something exciting that we cross promoted. So I find those kinds of things really inspiring and exciting because you don't need huge advertising budgets. You don't need to try and compete with, people who are throwing millions of dollars at Google and Facebook, or if you're in e-commerce, Amazon. You can win simply by having relationships. You don't have to outsmart the algorithms either necessarily. Yeah, there's no algorithm to outsmart. Like, who am I outsmarting? I am outsmarting, all my whatever. SparkToro doesn't have a lot of competition because the space we're in is very new and different. But we're outsmarting the platforms that want us to spend way too much money reaching our audience through them by building something organically interesting. Wonderful. Thank you, Rand. I'm glad. Thank you for bringing it back down to that level. And I didn't realize you guys were only a two-person team, so that's good to know. And teeny tiny. So I've heard, in previous webinars and workshops I've attended that you've been teaching, I've heard you use the concept of inbound flywheel marketing, or inbound marketing flywheel. And I'm wondering if you can explain that to people briefly for a few minutes, and also talk about how partnerships can help drive a flywheel strategy. Yeah. Let's actually see. I wonder, I might actually be able to show you. I've got a few visuals around the flywheel concept, and that might be a good way to go. Is it cool if I share my screen? Yeah, you should be able to do that. If not, we can upgrade your access further if needed, but you should be able to. All right. So, okay, let's see if this. All right. Sweet. So I've got that open. Now all I need to do is go share screen. This one, share. Okay, can you see this marketing flywheel? I'm in the middle of a presentation here, but I think it should work fine. Yeah. So the idea is, I don't think a new one, right? But the fundamental concept, in inbound marketing flywheel, that can work fine, but there's lots of different kinds of marketing flywheels you can build, right? So I like to talk about just a generic marketing flywheel, and then you can apply to your business however you want. If inbound's your deal, great. If you want an ads flywheel, fine. If PR is your jam, go for it. The idea is that it creates a competitive advantage by essentially scaling with decreasing inertia, right? So the fundamental concept is that you're doing a marketing activity, whatever it is. Maybe you're buying Google Ads even. Maybe you are sending tweets. Maybe you are publishing podcasts, or, Justin, you're having nerdy Jewish guys come on your show, and and they got a bunch of Adventure Time art in their background. But right, like whatever it is that you are doing, the idea is that you do it over and over again, right, repetitively. But each time you do it, you either get more benefit from doing it, so it's the same amount of effort to put in, or each time you do it, it gets easier and you get the same amount of output. Those are the two ways that you can essentially keep doing something over and over again and build increasing return on investment. So the idea, right, let's go here, is that you do a marketing thing and then you boost that thing's reach somehow, right? So for this, whatever, this webinar, maybe right, 25 people are in attendance this time, and then hopefully next time you do it, there's 30 or 40, and 3 years from now when you do it, there's 500, right? That, I don't know if that's actually a goal. Maybe you want to keep it small, but regardless, right? Maybe you put the webinar on YouTube, and so it has a long tail, and then over the next few years, hundreds or thousands of people watch what we're doing today, and that kind of thing. The idea is that you grow your audience from that, right? So next time you do this marketing thing, you have a bigger audience to reach, and you've improved algorithmic signals of some kind. That this could be, if you're in email marketing world, it could be your deliverability rate, or the rate at which, Gmail puts you into the primary tab instead of the promotions tab, or the open rate, and the click-through rate, all those kinds of things. If it's Twitter, right, or LinkedIn or Facebook or Instagram, it's the engagement rate, such that, the platform shows your content on that social media platform more times. And then the next time you do this thing, you're getting higher ROI because you have a bigger email list to send to, you have more people subscribed to your webinar, more people are following your social channels, you have gained algorithmic signals that help you rank better in Google, whatever the thing is. So this cycle continues and continues. And what is really hard, what I find is really hard for most business owners and most marketers, is believing in the model and getting started. Because the first few times you do this, it's not going to go very well. You're going to find friction, right? So some of these points in here will not work. And that's okay, right? The process is one of discovery and investment. But if you're not willing to put in 6 months, 9 months, a year, repeating this over and over, trying and failing and learning from that failure, and then figuring out, okay, we got a loop going, we got a flywheel going, then you're not going to win, right? And so a lot of people try this a little bit. They blog for 3 months, they give up, they hire a content marketing agency for 60 days, and they're like, this isn't working out. And then what do? They throw money at Google and Facebook, right? And to give you an example, my previous company was Moz that you mentioned, right? And we basically did SEO. This was my flywheel for like 17 years. I do, some keyword research, figure out keywords to write about. I'd publish that to the Moz blog. I'd amplify it on social and in our email and via outreach and that kind of stuff. Hopefully get more subscribers. More people would see that blog post and they'd be like, wow, this Rand guy knows what he's talking about in SEO. I'm going to sign up so that I'm on his email list. And then we'd get more links and more engagement. So now we could rank higher in Google next time we did it. And for real, like I promise you, for at least the first 2 years, I was blogging 5 nights a week and getting nowhere. 2 years. Now, granted, I was an idiot. So like, I really did not know what I was doing, like a complete putz. But over time, I eventually figured out, you're in your early 20s, these guys are cocky in their early 20s and they think they know what they're doing. They do not, and neither did I, but I figured it out, right? Over time, I figured it out, learned. And then once this flywheel got going, when I left Moz, Whiteboard Friday, the video series that I published weekly there, 10,000, 12,000, 15,000 people watching, sometimes 30 or 40,000 people would see it. I've been recognized at airports because people are like, hey, you're that guy from Whiteboard Friday, right? I guess if you like internet nerds, sure. But the thing about SEO and content that's tough about this curve is that when I did it, it was the early 2000s. There was very little competition. Today, it's really tough without an established site, without an established brand. It's very difficult. And obviously, as you grow that, SEO gets easier. So if you were going to make this investment, I would urge you to do partnerships and brand marketing and influence, our influence sorts of marketing, the kinds of things that Justin and I have been sharing with you. I would urge you to do those first and then invest in SEO, because Google just does not give a lot of benefit. And there's so much competition in those early stages. If people don't know you, like you, trust you, link to you thousands of times, Google thinks that your site has all these signals, man, getting on page one, never mind position one, it's just a slog. When I started at Moz, there was probably maybe 100 competitors that I was realistically going up against, and only probably 10 of them were really savvy and going after the same keywords I was. If I wanted to do that today in the SEO space, it's probably 10,000
I was going to say
that are savvy and 1 million that are trying, right?
Yeah.
So
that's a great point. And it's actually kind of why a good portion of the reason why we're, increasingly focusing on this topic, because exactly that. We tell clients, if we look at their domain authority and it's not in the 40s, they're probably, and it depends on the keyword, of course, maybe 70s for certain keywords. But
yeah, I mean, what's weird is right now, I don't know what SparkToro is, but I would guess it's probably in the 60s. Can't rank for crap, right? Because the marketing space is just so super competitive. There's so many people, in our space, roughly, who are in the 90s and 100, right? And so what are you going to, like, realistically, that's not where we're going to win business. We're not going to win at SEO. We are going to win from partnerships, from reaching out to people, from guesting on podcasts, from being on people's webinars, from joining YouTube channels and live events like that, from going and speaking at conferences, from doing our own content research that sort of has viral opportunities on social. We get more traffic from LinkedIn than we do from Google search outside of our brand.
Yeah, and that I'm not entirely surprised, and that's a great, reinforcement of what we're talking about today. Thank you. I want to briefly share one example of the best flywheel strategy I've ever been involved with was that case study that I shared for the holistic holiday, because I have some numbers I can throw behind it. That first year in 2011, we had one influencer, and he wasn't. I chose him because he was very active on Facebook. He had a large personal following. He had like 5,000 friends. He had his 20,000 person group that he ran, all interconnected with the topic of the event. So we invited him to speak on the event, to be a guest VIP type. We kind of created a VIP program, and he was like the VIP guy, right? And the first year he got about 25 people. 25 times $1,000 or so per person. That was the impact of the work that first year. But what I remember realizing in the first day, we had the opening night party, and I noticed the change of energy at the event. The event was getting has noticeably younger, and he's my age. He's like 40, 41, something like that. And the event was noticeably younger. This was 10 years ago. So he was 30, I was 30. And I started walking around asking people where they had heard about the event. And repeatedly, it was 1 or 2 degrees of separation from him. They didn't all actually track to his affiliate promotion, but about 100 people probably came because of him, even though he only got credit for 20 of them. And that's big enough to impact an event with 12 to 1,500 people. You can notice the difference. So that I got goosebumps when I realized that at the opening night. And I went right to the CEO and I said, he got 25 people, but look, that person's sister heard about it from this person, and they're here together. They brought their parents. So that's like 5 people, and that adds up. And so I was able to convince him to invest more time and resources into building that program. And then, so for a few years later, we had 4 or 5 similar social influencers. And then we started getting organizational influencers, large nonprofits, PETA, and then Forks Over Knives. We had large partners approaching us wanting to participate. And one of the ones that approached us ended up 1 year driving 600 registrations. And that year we did $1.2 million in ticket revenue just off of affiliate partners. And we just had to pay them a fixed amount of money, which was very affordable compared to social or other advertising channels for those leads, just for the first time they came. The next year, if they came back, there was no cost associated. So that's the flywheel, 25,000 the first year, 50,000 the second year, 150,
building,
400, 600, 1.2 million, and now sold out events because of the lists we built off of those strategies.
Yeah, I love it. It's really smart. So the one thing that bugs me a little bit, Justin, is, I'm sure you've observed this too, and probably everyone in the audience has, is like the word influencer 7-8 years ago used to mean go find someone who is influential, someone or some organization that is influential to this group of people. And weirdly, today, when people in marketing world say influencer, what they mean half-naked person on Instagram with 1 million followers.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of like, all right, that guy has, his chest looks nice and like he has 6-pack abs and he poses on beaches, but like, what is that's, so we should pay him?
Purely lifestyle.
It doesn't make any sense to me, right? And so the problem is that mindset around what influencer means has, I think, perverted the industry. I use perverted in the clinical sense, not any other way, but it's changed the industry perception. And so now there's this sense that influencer marketing, investing in influencer marketing, means that type of thing. Like, let's go find whatever, right? 6-pack abs dude, and pay them some amount of money to pose with our product or to endorse it or to put up a social post or something like this. And I don't think that's particularly healthy, especially for most B2B, for most small, medium businesses. When I think of, when I phrase it, I try and think of it as influence with no R marketing. Like, let me go find a publication, a person, a podcast, a website, a conference or event that reaches the audience I want to reach. And then how do I build value exchange with them? How do I do something that's useful to them and something that's useful for us, and also adds a lot of value for whatever audience we're both trying to reach? That form of influence marketing to me is what you're doing and what we're doing, and it's incredibly valuable and it's super creative. Like, it's so broad that you can't put a fixed structure. I can't say, oh, do this, then do this, then do this, then do this. It's not a 5-step program, right? It's who are the sources of influence in your industry? How can you reach them? What could you potentially do? This is a very creative process. What could you potentially do together? What would you pitch them on that they would say yes to? Mm-hmm. Then you do that, right? So that's
I agree, and I haven't personally abandoned the term influencer. I've kind of added some qualifiers to it to say, like,
yeah, man, you're helping carry the torch. Like,
authentic influencers, right? I'm saying, like,
the real influencer.
I'm educating my clients on this all the time. I'm like, well, some of them are apprehensive about influencer marketing because of what you said, or they assume that that's what I'm talking about. So I have to say, no, I'm not talking about that. And actually, I have had clients where within their niche, there are both.
Sure.
There are vegan fitness influencers.
Right.
And then there are vegan health influencers, and there are vegan animal rights influencers, and there's everything. There's vegan whatever. So I do a lot of, like I've been saying this, I'm doing a lot of plant-based events and convening and brand marketing. And for them, I'm like, no, we don't want this influencer who's really only focused on their image and their lifestyle. They have no actual knowledge about anything of value to the movement.
Right.
They're just
and I think the challenge too is, a lot of folks look at the number, like raw number of social followers. And that is their measure of, is this person, publication, organization influential? And that is a very bad number to use because, to your point, right? Like, many people are following some of those influencers for not because they are interested in the topic, or because they're in the industry, or because they're potential customers of whatever you're doing, but because they're interested in that person's lifestyle or image.
Yeah. And sometimes it's not even just purely image. Lifestyle, it could be celebrity.
Yeah.
It could be an actress who's also plant-based. And so people think, oh, she would be great for this event because she has a huge following. Well, maybe only 5 or 10% of her following are following her because of her diet, right?
So what I want in that world is, instead of thinking, what's the raw number of followers? How big is this person's total social presence or total audience size? I want to know, what is the audience that I want to reach doing online? What is their behavior? What are they following, listening to, paying attention to, reading, subscribing to? That's the audience that I want to reach. Give me the list of people and publications that reach them, and what percent follow them. That's what I want.
Rand, someone should create a tool that does that.
No kidding. Oh my God, Justin, what are we doing? Like, let's go build something like that.
Okay, that is a great segue to SparkToro, Rand. So Rand has actually created that tool with his business partner. So tell us about SparkToro and what it does.
Look at this. Look at this setup. You just lob the softball and then. So sure, yeah. So SparkToro is essentially it's still in relatively nascent stages. We're only a year into having the product live. But this is exactly what it does, right? You say, yeah, for example, I want to reach people whose profile says that they're vegan, right? So their Instagram profile or their Twitter profile or their LinkedIn bio or their Facebook page about section has the word vegan in it, or has the word, animal rights in it, or right? So you can search for those things in SparkToro, and SparkToro will return a data about aggregated, anonymized data, so not sort of personally identifiable information about thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people who match that criteria. And you can do this for anything. You could say, I want to reach architects in California. I want to reach CFOs in Canada. I am looking to reach people who use the hashtag indie video games. I want to reach people who follow some particular person online, because that's my audience. I want to reach more people like the people who already follow or share my brand and content, right? So you plug in your own website, plug in your competitor's website, and then SparkToro will show you data about that audience. So it could well be the case that people, I guess we could do a quick search here right now. Let's go. Boom, share. All right, can you see my screen here? I'm going to drag this over to the other screen. All right, so let's see. My audience uses these words in their profile, vegan. And so essentially what it's doing is it's searching this giant database of 78 million web and social profiles. And there's 33,786 people in our database. SparkToro is almost exclusively English language only right now, so just FYI. But you can see what words and phrases they're using in their bios. You can see hashtags that they use. You can see frequently used phrase, peanut butter and sweet potato. Yeah, those are vegan. And then you can see what they follow, read, listen to, right? So social accounts that they follow, podcasts that they listen to, websites that they visit, press accounts they read, YouTube channels they subscribe to. So you might say, oh, sweet, forks over knives. You mentioned them, right?
I have a question. Are we supposed to be seeing this? Because right now we're just seeing the search.
Your screen sharing is paused. Why is that? Resume share? How about that? Okay.
There we go.
Okay, sorry about that. Okay, right. So I did a search for vegan. Here you go, 33,786 profiles. Our database is about 120 days old at maximum. So we've essentially crawled all these profiles in the last 120 days. So if somebody, 6 months ago had the word vegan in their profile and they took it out, they would not be included in this data set. And our data comes from 10 social networks, but the four primary ones are LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and then we also have data from Reddit, YouTube, Medium, Quora, et cetera, et cetera. Right, so I think, where did I see? Oh yeah, Forks Over Knives. They are in YouTube channels that are subscribed to. So you might say, oh, Forks Over Knives, yeah, that's pretty good. We had a lot of success with them. Let us also go into maybe nutrition facts or Beyond Meat or vegan cuts would be useful.
Nutrition Facts is another top 5 partner for us. So yeah, there you go.
So this is exactly the kind of thing, right? Like you could find these partnerships organically, you could discover them over time, or you could kind of go, oh yeah, I like it, I want it, add to my list. I'm going to create a new list and I'm going to call it vegan marketing partnership opportunities. Boom. Now I've got my list and I'm going to go check out some podcasts and add those to this list and, investigate them like, oh, okay. Nerd podcast radio. Interesting. Well, yeah. Oh, plant-based news podcast. Perfect. Great. Nutrition facts, eco chic.
Plant-based news is an aspirational partner. I've seen some reports of how well they've done for other people, and I don't have a relationship, but I do have a 1 degree of separation. I have partners who work with them, so I can get the intro.
Yeah. So this is another great thing that we should talk about, which is when, as you're building a list in here, or however you're building it, right? You don't have to use SparkToro. You could do this sort of manually, like uncover what your audience pays attention to. You could survey them and interview them and start to build this list organically. But, if I get to a list like, here we go. Oh, so it will collect email data for all of these folks so that you can go reach out. I think it's still collecting the data right now, but I could go to, let's go to one of my other lists, clinical research, and I could say, oh, okay, yeah, how do I get in touch with this person? Oh, perfect. There's the email address and here's the Twitter profile. And my advice is not to cold email people. It's to build a relationship through social, like following them on social, interacting with them a little bit, getting an intro on LinkedIn, getting a connection from someone who knows them. That is the way I would play it. And I tend to have much more success than just sending a cold email.
Yeah.
But, it's up to you.
I agree. I can triangulate plant-based news through 4 or 5 existing friends, other partners I work with who can make that intro for me. So exactly.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I want to make sure I have time for Q&A. So I'm going to ask one more question. If you could give us a brief answer on this, and then we'll move into Q&A. Last question. What are some of the common pitfalls and mistakes you've seen, whether your own efforts or things you've seen people try to do in your career on partnership marketing? What are some of the mistakes and pitfalls you've seen?
So many. Sometimes it is getting a DSLR camera that's too hot to handle. All right, here I'm gonna switch to my not quite as influencer friendly other camera, but hopefully it'll work out right. So yeah, I think a couple of the big ones we have talked about. One is believing that influencer means sort of your raw social following size or audience size or number of visits. That's problematic for sure, rather than influence to the particular audience. Another one that I have seen is definitely that short-termism thinking, right? Where someone says, oh, I'm going to make this investment, and if I don't see a return in 3 months, 6 months, we're going to stop doing it and try something else. Look, in advertising, that works really well, right? Because if you don't see a return on your ad spend very quickly, you should shut off that channel. You're spending a bunch of money. But in organic sorts of things, content marketing, PR, email list building, SEO, influence marketing, even influencer marketing, that's not how it works, right? You are building up brand awareness and attention over time. You're getting that flywheel going. If it starts to spin, even if it's not yet showing ROI, if you have the patience and energy to invest in that, you will beat your competition. You will build up an engine that works amazingly well. And so big mistake that I've seen is people doing it that way. Another big mistake I've seen is people thinking they should do it only themselves. I will be 100% honest. I don't think most business owners should be doing this sort of work solo without a partner. I would hire an agency or consultant. They are, compared to hiring a full-time employee, It is super cheap, especially in the United States with, Justin, you're here in the US, yeah?
Yeah.
So, right, like healthcare costs alone are just massive. Oftentimes you can get an agency with a whole team, working on your project for less than it would cost to hire an in-house marketer who's experienced on this stuff full time. And then partner with them, set goals. They will start working from day one. Oftentimes you bring someone onto your team that it takes a long time for them to ramp up and all that kind of stuff. So that is the way I would play it. And we have used a bunch of agencies for all sorts of stuff and consultants here at SparkToro. Like I mentioned, Moz, partnered with Distilled for many years and had a lot of success with that. So I love the agency approach. That I wouldn't write that off.
Okay, wonderful. I'll add one for when you're doing partnerships for events. The biggest problem I've seen is people getting too ambitious with their campaign ideas and what they're going to do, and then getting into the actual crunch time of promoting and producing an event and not actually having the bandwidth to actually execute it, and then settling for very mediocre execution where just only social media promotions is all that's happening. The email execution doesn't come together. All the other things don't come together, and then they can end up writing it off because it was overly ambitious strategically. Doesn't really build a good flywheel.
Yeah. Right. And I think this is a learning process too. So if you're doing an event, one of the challenges is sometimes the first 3, 4, 5 times you run the event, the audience is a little small. Maybe you're even losing money on some of those first events, but you can recognize, right? You can stick with it and you can see, hey, event number 1, 80 people came. It was, this successful. It cost us this much to put on. Next one, 100 people came. 110. Now we're stuck at 115. Ooh, 140, 200, 260, 500.
Yeah.
That's how it always goes. Anyone I've ever talked to in event marketing space, it's that hit a plateau, boom, skyrocket.
Yeah, I agree. So we have a question here from Sumaya. She says, I have a couple of clients who are trying to organize panel events later this year. Do you have any tips on organizing panels and how to pitch to partners and influencers for panel events?
Yeah, so let's see. I've done a lot of panels myself. I think that the challenge is often making the format exciting for both the panelist and for the audience. And that's just because panels can be sort of, what do I want to say? A little bit like, I'm going to say something that everybody already knows. And then we sort of, it can be tough to get unique, interesting, useful insights from a panel, even when the players are, great folks. I think one of the ways that I play that is the format of how you design the questions and discussion, getting a moderator in there who can nail the process of sort of kindly cutting people off when they're rambling, and kindly guiding the discussion back to things that are truly useful to the audience, creating some audience engagement, types of things in there. That can help a lot. And then the panel setup as well. If you can make the topic something that is not merely informative, but some combination of also controversial, doesn't have to be politically controversial, but like, for example, having a discussion. I've done a couple of these where I've been invited to be a panelist who argues against putting all your ad dollars into Google and Facebook, along with advertising professionals whose job it is to take their clients' money and put it towards effective Google and Facebook advertising. And those can be really interesting, right? Because there's an inherent conflict. Like you want to see,
debate, basically.
Yeah, right. Like it's a little bit like, okay, cage match arena. It's obviously friendly and cordial and kind, right? And we have a lot of respect for one another, but we're also presenting different points of view. I've done this in the venture capital space as well, where I'm essentially, oh yeah, my company raised $30 million from really good investors. This is my last company. And that did not go well, right? And like, here's why, even though I respect these other people on stage, you should not take their money. And if they, you shouldn't even pitch them. I would recommend these other things, right? And that's like, oh, wow, that's engaging. That's different. That is, you're creating some conflict and then presenting that. That's interesting, right? I think those types of panels work better than just, here's 5 experts in this space and they're going to talk to you about X.
Yeah, I agree. I'm going to throw a couple ideas out because I've been doing a lot of conference design. One is, if you're doing it for partnership development, it's important that you have at least one partner that's bought into helping promote it, who has a big list. They are the influence you need, right? Not always do the speakers have an incentive or bandwidth to promote your panel. So organizational partners, maybe they are providing a speaker, but they're actually more than just the speaker. They have a marketing engine behind them. They have a team that can promote it. And maybe they can be a sponsor or co-producer of it. And as far as format, I agree, having a good moderator is really important to that, getting those kind of dynamic formats and who can design a dynamic format. I also find that opening with giving someone who's a real expert or maybe is the best known a little more time to start with, like do a 20 to 30 minute keynote and then go into a deep, like a 4 or 5 person panel on the topic, or workshop format. Even though it might require less partners, the learning can be a lot deeper if it's a workshop format, which is more like actually educational lecture or a slide deck or actually breakout activities, things like that. That can be the most valuable virtual training experiences I've seen, and I've designed some successful ones of those. So what we're actually designing a panel, a workshop series for our client, and we're asking them to pick 5 organizational partners, create a series of 5 workshop or webinars that have 1 partner each, and get them all to promote it, so that they're basically committing to collaborating with each other. And the convener is actually creating a collaboration between organizations that haven't worked together before, and that's the value add. You're bringing people together who want to work together, who don't have the resources to coordinate it. So we're basically out of time, and I want to give Sarah a moment to share about the workshop we're doing in 2 weeks. So Sarah, are you there? Can you give folks a 1-minute overview of the workshop that we're doing in 2 weeks? You're muted.
Yeah, so I just want to invite everybody to join us on June 15th. I'm going to be teaching a 2-hour class called Apple versus Facebook. And we're going to dig a little bit into that drama and what's going on. That's something that I've been obviously studying for the last few weeks. And I'm really enjoying this big tech company versus big tech company sort of showdown that we're having right now. So I invite everybody to check it out. It's a really affordable class. There are about 30 tickets, I think, for $29. And it's just going to be a great discussion where we all sort of hash out our questions and our problems. And I'll be coming to the table with a lot of knowledge I've gathered. So I hope to see you all there June 15th. It'll be from 3 to 5 p.m. Eastern at the end of the day.
Thank you, Sarah. Jenna just dropped a link in the chat. And Rand, I want to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to come and share with our audience. And we'll be sure to share this recording out broadly with our bigger audience as well.
Wonderful. Justin, Sarah, thank you so much for having me and putting this together. And thanks everyone for coming.
Thank you.